Welcome to week 4 of Care Essentials. This session is one of 4 modules, so please look for the other 3 weeks in the series. This module, presented by Lisa Jaworski, Therapeutic Recreation Specialist, will address meaningful activities, leisure activities, activities of daily living, and supports and resources. Please have a pen and paper handy for both the self-reflection sections of this presentation, as well as to write down any questions that may arise for you throughout. Questions can be addressed by contacting your social worker at the Alzheimer's Society or by joining us at one of our monthly caregiver support group meetings. Keep in mind that this webinar isn't intended to replace the First Link Learning Series sessions that are offered in person at the Alzheimer's Society. Please consider registering for our in-person sessions when they again become available. Also note that this education presentation is for your knowledge building. As everyone's situation is unique, the information provided in this presentation is for educational purposes and not specific advice for your situation. Please visit our website at www.alzheimerlondon.ca for a staff list, as well as for information on upcoming support group meetings, as well as other education webinars which may be of interest. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today for the First Link Learning Series webinar, Meaningful Activities for Persons with Dementia, Techniques to Help Encourage, Enhance, and Empower the People We Care For. This webinar is being recorded and will be archived for future viewing. Today, we have the pleasure of having a guest speaker, Lisa Jaworski. Lisa is a therapeutic recreation specialist with the Behavioral Response Team, also known as the BRT team, which is part of the Geriatric Mental Health Program at the London Health Sciences Centre. The Behavioral Response Team is also known as the Behavioral Supports Ontario, also known as BSO, mobile team for London and Middlesex. Lisa's current role involves conducting assessments, capacity building, and community collaboration, including group facilitation. Since 1999, she has been working with older adult population, particularly those who have a cognitive impairment and live in the community or in long-term care. Her professional passion lies in helping older adults identify activities that bring meaning and purpose to their daily lives despite memory loss. Lisa has developed an interest in identifying how each of us at any age or stage can intentionally improve our well-being and live life to the fullest, especially as we strive to care for others. So before Lisa begins, I would like to go over a few guidelines for the presentation. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar will be available for viewing on the Alzheimer's Society website located in the COVID-19 Education Zone. All participants have been muted, and during this presentation, should you have any technical issues, please let us know and put your comments in the chat box, and we will do our best to assist you. Should you have any questions or comments to share, please type them in the Q&A box. You can also ask your question anonymously if you prefer. To locate these boxes, move your mouse around near the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. You should see a control panel appear with the Q&A and chat icons. Just click on the specific icon and then type your question and/or comment. Once the presentation has ended, we will stop the recording so questions can be monitored and discussion can happen. I will now turn things over to Lisa. Enjoy the presentation.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm hoping that the information I have to share is helpful for you, whether you are working in the field or whether you have a family member or a loved one and are just looking for other ideas. So I'm really pleased and grateful that I get to be a part of your journey. So today I plan to discuss what meaningful activity is. So starting right at ground level on what we mean when we say that, understand why meaningful activity is so important, explain how to encourage participation, describe tips and techniques for success, provide examples of activities, summarize the key points, and there will be time for questions and comments at the very end, which I know will be added on after without the recording piece. So what is meaningful activity? Meaningful activity is an activity that is significant to the person and has purpose. So you'll notice that I have down that they include activities, roles, and routines. On the right-hand side in the green circles, it lists grooming, leisure, and industry. And I added this in because if you have resources or information in your handouts from the Alzheimer's Society, this is how they refer to meaningful activities. So I thought it was nice to kind of complement the two and explain that it's all of these things. I really like to make the point that in a 24-hour day, when you break up a day, the way I remember being taught was that 8 hours used to be and should still be for sleeping. 8 hours was more for occupational work. And then the other 8 hours was for everything else. So when we talk about that, you can think about all of the things that we do in our work setting, but also in our other leisure time, if you will. So it's not just leisure. So we can think about our activities, roles, and routines as being, anything from doing the dishes and getting ready in the morning, which could be industry and grooming on the right, or doing things like spending time with your kids, reading a book, swimming, whatever it might be. So all of these things have meaning in different ways. And of course, we enjoy them at different levels, but they all still really matter. Why is meaningful activity so important? And this might be common sense for some, but I think it's worth going over. Well, for so many reasons, and of course, many more than what I have listed here. Because it creates opportunities for pleasurable activities or pleasurable experiences, it promotes health and well-being. It's human nature. If we didn't have these activities built into our daily lives, I mean, who would we be and what would life mean to us? So it's really important even just for that. It induces feelings of success and accomplishment. So think of, when you get to the end of your day, how you feel like I've accomplished something. Okay, I did A, B, and C. And even if you didn't accomplish everything you set out to do, you still had things that you engaged in, whether it was just sitting on the couch and spending time with somebody or reading a book or whatever it might be. Also, they give pleasure and a sense of fulfillment. They can enhance dignity and self-esteem. Like I mentioned, having that sense of accomplishment. Activities structure time and normalize life. So if you think about your roles and routines, when you wake up in the morning, you know what to expect first, whether you go to the bathroom and then you shower, have breakfast, get a coffee. All of these things provide structure in our day and help the days make sense. Also, they provide comfort and attachment, as well as overall giving meaning to life. So I'm pretty sure all of you can agree with me when we talk about that. And I find it really important to, in order to make information that we're learning make sense, relating it back to yourself, which is why I'm asking the question, why do you engage in the activities you do from day to day? So keep this in the back of your mind as we talk going forward. I think it'll really help because although we're talking about ways to engage somebody who has dementia, this is for anybody really. So I'll be talking about ways that you can modify and maybe some communication and approach techniques, but really all of these ideas are important for us to remember for ourselves as well. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. So how do we encourage someone with dementia to engage in activities? And of course, a little joke, I guess, make them meaningful. So if somebody wants you to do something and engage in some kind of activity, if you don't want to do it, or you don't find a purpose behind it, or you find you don't have time, there's so many reasons that you're not going to want to participate. So same goes for somebody who has dementia. We need to know the person. That is first and foremost. So if you can remember what the person's strengths are, skills, abilities, and understanding what those are for that person, you're going to be a lot more successful. So knowing, I added some bullet points here for you to refer to. We tend to get into a space where when we're working or caring for somebody who has dementia, we think more about the challenges, the situation that's going on, the barriers that we come across. So I really want you to think of what's going right and what long-standing skills and abilities does the person have or did the person have, whether it's past or present. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So think about the person's personal interests, their occupation, their skills and abilities, their talents, and their personality traits. So just in your mind right now, if you have somebody in mind that you're here listening to this presentation for, think about what those skills and strengths might be. So for example, if you had a family member or a loved one who is a teacher, I'm going to guess that probably what's going to be very important to them is helping children, the love of children, or maybe adults if they taught children or adults, and also knowing that there's probably a lot of organization and structure in being a teacher and providing education for others. So what are the skill sets that a teacher would need to have? So within a person's occupation, there's a lot of different scopes of practice and skill sets that we can really tap into even when a person has dementia. And understanding some of those motivating factors is really important. Talents. So another example is, some people just have that artistic ability ingrained in them that wasn't even necessarily taught, or that musical piece that they just, thrive in and do so well naturally. So think about the things that come naturally and that are very long-term for the individual. That will help us be most successful with the people that we're working with. Understanding a person's values, in my opinion, is really essential. So I've listed under 4 different categories, and these are different ways that in recreation therapy we can assess someone. So considering a person's attitude, considering their interest, their motivation, and satisfaction. So I kind of covered a little bit on those different factors already, but just to kind of recap and give you an example, under attitude, I have down work-oriented, leisure, social versus private, health needs, and past versus present interests. So if you think about a person's attitude, some people, or think about yourself, again, I think it's most important when you kind of relate this information back to you. A lot of people, after they retire, still might have that sense of being work-oriented. And one of the factors, one of the symptoms of somebody who has a type of dementia could be the fact of not being able to remember that they're not working anymore. So if a person's still in that zone, it might be helpful to make things make sense by making it work-oriented. So it could mean, how about I would love your help to get some of these cards and games organized so that we can get them ready for the children at the church. So making sense and providing some kind of background on why we would engage in something relating to maybe our work experience or something that's more intrinsically valued. Understanding if a person is social versus private. So does somebody prefer to be more outgoing, prefer to be socially connected? Or are they maybe more introverted and prefer to have that quiet time and private time? And I know we all have different levels of private versus social, and there's, of course, a time and a place for both. So really understanding what the person's attitude is in that situation is really helpful. Some people are very motivated by the fact that they need to take care of their health, or if their doctor tells them they need to do something, they're more apt to do it. So considering some of those pieces can be really helpful as well when trying to figure out even wording and communication approach styles that you would use with the individual. And also past versus present interests. The next one, so under interest, I have physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. But these are the domains that we in therapeutic recreation really focus on as seeing the whole person. So understanding what their interests are, given those different domains, is really helpful. Maybe a person is more intellectual, or maybe they learn best in physical ways. So if the person's athletic or enjoys, you notice that they tend to walk or need to move a lot, that might be something that is a good motivating factor, or a way that we can entice the person to take part. Also, whether you're indoor or outdoor, maybe the person likes to be outdoors more than indoors. And right now, that's a great thing. Not many activities, it's not as safe to be indoors with other people. So consider some of these pieces. And then motivation itself, understanding that under values, number one, in my opinion, I think I've heard this is the second reason that, the first or second reason that most people are motivated in life is because we want to help other people or be helpful in some way. And I don't know anybody who hasn't agreed with this. So if you think about it, all of us really want to help either individuals, so help one another, or you want to help by giving back to the world in some way, whether it's plants, whether it's taking care of our children, whether it's taking care of pets and animals. So we all want to be helpful in some aspect in order to give back. That could be a motivating factor in itself. So by providing a purpose that's helpful to others, a person's going to be more receptive. Some people are motivated by creativity. So that's another piece where if it's just ingrained in them, and I have a daughter who loves to be creative, and she'll do anything by either painting or taking pictures or designing blueprints. If she knows it's, mom wants an office of her own, she'll take all of her time just to do something like that. So using a person's creative abilities can be a motivating factor if it's something that they feel comfortable and strong in. Providing incentives. This is another one that, sometimes it's just a matter of saying, hey, after we get this done, let's go have a coffee, or we can look forward to going to visit the grandchildren after we get this piece done. So that can be an incentive in itself. Not if you do this, then we'll be able to do that. But after we're done, let's, go for a visit or go for a drive. Some people are motivated by learning. So just lifelong learning in general. And so if you know that this is the case for somebody, then this might be an opportunity where we say, we'll get to, let's do some searching and figuring out what this means, or finding other ways to make it worthwhile and beneficial to the person. I know a lot of individuals, I'm sure you do too, who are competitive in nature. So this is great too. This is something where we can learn that if a person feels like if they're going to win or do better, then they're going to take part, then we can tap into that. And also, like I mentioned before, health. Health can be a motivating factor for people if they think, in order to take care of myself, sometimes even in regards to dementia, if they want to stay stimulated and it's to take care of their brain health, that in itself can be motivating. So we can use those pieces. I've had that success before where it's, you've mentioned to me that you really want to do anything you can to take care of your own health and keep yourself stimulated. Well, this is one of those ways. So being able to explain that to a person can be helpful too, depending on if that's something that motivates them. And then under satisfaction, it says relieve stress, fun, stimulation, and accomplishment. So another example is I've run across individuals who don't care to give back and don't care to help others at this point in life. I've heard responses where it's, I've helped others all my life. It is my turn now. I just want to sit back and people can give me a hand. So if that's the case, fine, absolutely fine. We can think of it more in the way of what can we do, to make it a more pleasurable experience where the person feels like maybe they're being treated in some way. So some examples could be giving the person a spa, getting their nails done, or maybe shining the shoes, whatever it is, but maybe it's more pleasurable and fun type activities that can be used in this way. So I hope that gives you a couple of examples on what I mean regarding understanding values. So I did mention that I would bring up the domains a little bit more. And so when we're in person for the Alzheimer's Society, when I do this presentation, I have a handout that I provide. And it really breaks down different types of activity ideas that can be done under these different domains. So a couple examples under physical, I think that's kind of common sense, but whether it's walking or whether it's some kind of sports that the person used to enjoy, they may still enjoy doing something similar now. And it's just a matter of us being able to modify in whatever way we can. Exercises, maybe actual working out and going to the gym isn't so possible, but there are home workouts. You can use YouTube, you can do seated exercises. So thinking about ways for us to modify activities is really important. Intellectually, the same thing. So understand the person's abilities now, their communication level, as well as, were they intellectually, was that a strength for them? So reading, thinking about ways that we can stimulate somebody intellectually, reading, writing, sharing stories with others, having the opportunity to maybe do a fill in the blank, word searches, whatever it might be. But again, I really don't like when we just kind of go to, do crosswords every day. And my doctor told me that I need to stay, keep my brain stimulated. So I'm going to do some crosswords. If it doesn't mean anything and you're not enjoying it, it's not going to be helpful. So find things that make sense, that are enjoyable for the person. The more you enjoy it, if they're a little bit challenging, but you still feel successful, the program or the activity is going to be much more effective and last longer. Emotional and psychological, so these really go together, and sometimes I blend in social as well to this category. It's broken up for therapeutic recreation, but they can overlap. So understanding things that provide that emotional fuel that we need. So being with our loved ones, understanding also how we're feeling and how our emotions need to be met. So this could be, feeling validated, for example, and having music, things like pets, the people we love, being able to reminisce. So thinking differently about the opportunities that a person has. And again, socially, same sort of thing, where it's important to think about our connections and our environment around us, on what are our opportunities, and also considering what's missing under these, which is a good segue, I believe, into going into the spiritual domain. I think this gets missed a lot of the time. And this doesn't necessarily mean church and going to church regularly, but understanding that spiritually, I believe the older we get, the more important this tends to be. So really, is there a way, whether it's nature, whether it's expressing gratitude, whether it's taking time just to breathe and be mindful, there's ways that you can do yoga or meditation now. Use guided meditation, whatever it might be, even for a few minutes, just to slow down and just be in the moment. So I consider all of those things to be spiritual, and I hope you'll kind of consider how you can help a person be more in touch with that side that I think sometimes goes missing. So in my role, and when we're working with older adults, especially with dementia, we really focus on a holistic view. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but I did add the website down below, peceslearning.com. And Pieces is a 2-day training that professionals take, but we really talk about and learn about the physical factors that a person might be experiencing. And I think this is important to mention here, just because this could impact the reasons why a person will or will not engage in activities. So thinking about the physical factors, whether a person's tired, whether a person has pain, whether a person's hungry, thirsty. So all of these pieces could impact whether they're going to engage successfully or not. Intellectually, the same thing. So think about the person's communication abilities, what they're able to do, what they're not. I didn't mention under physical as well. Also thinking about, this actually might go under capabilities, but also thinking about a person's vision, hearing, mobility, and so on. So intellectual, also thinking about, are they able to read, write? And if maybe that's a little hard to do, is there a way that we can enhance this and provide the person with easier abilities or easier ways to engage successfully, whether it's larger font, larger pieces to a puzzle, sitting beside the person so that they can hear you better, and so on. Emotional, same thing, understanding that a person has a lifetime of experiences and a history of lived situations that they've been through. So there might be opportunities times where a person feels maybe anxious about a situation, or triggers that might make the person sad or excited. So it helps us to know what those situations are as best we can, so that we're more aware of how the person might be feeling in any given situation. Capabilities, same thing. Are they right-handed, left-handed? What's their vision like? if you put them in a situation, do you need to break down some of their activities of daily living? Reduce some of those the steps involved in an activity to make it more successful. Environmental, really, I think about the person's physical surroundings. So that can be, what the lighting's like in the room, what the noise is like. Is it over or under stimulating? Is there music on in the background that's distracting when you're trying to take part in something? And also, are there people around that either help the situation, so make it more comforting and familiar, or the opposite? Is there somebody around who maybe it's making it tense, or I'm feeling like I'm going to fail if I do this activity a wrong way? So that can impact how a person engages as well. And then socially, again, thinking about the person's social factors. Are the social factors being met? Are they more private and they're in this, completely overstimulating environment? So really consider that when we're working with individuals who have dementia. Okay, so tips and techniques. I plan to go through a few different key tips, in my opinion, and I'll talk about them in a bit of detail, so hopefully that they make sense to you. Social contact and simulation. Any contact was found to be effective in reducing verbally non-aggressive behavior. So this is like the number one effective strategy and technique when it comes to working with people who have dementia. Simulation means being able to simulate social contact or social opportunities when maybe the real thing, at least this is how I take it, maybe when the real thing isn't so possible. So some examples would be, or other opportunities could be pets. Sometimes just having pets around can be so helpful. And we often joke that sometimes pet therapy can be more effective because they don't talk back. So remembering that, if a person's a dog lover or a cat lover, or that they've always just found a sense of calm by being around pets, this is something that we really need to tap into. And if the real thing is not possible, I'll talk about other ways as well. One-to-one interaction, same thing. This is number one and probably most effective, given that the person knows how to communicate and knows that person. And if you don't know them, at least if you're calm, patient, kind, and compassionate, I think that will get us everywhere. Reminiscence and storytelling. So this is a great opportunity for that social contact and social interaction as well. Thinking about when you look through pictures. So the two pictures I added on this side, the first one is actually my brother and I. He gave me permission to add this in there. And underneath is a picture of horses, of course, providing an example of animal assisted and pet therapy ideas. So they don't necessarily have to be in person. You can look through old photographs, for example. It can be, going through those scrapbooks and maybe labeling pictures for later when names aren't so able to be recalled. It can be just talking about those positive memories that people just have ingrained, because we know that long-term memory is so much more successful than the short-term memory that's not so well ingrained in us with dementia. And storytelling. So sometimes I know that people who have dementia tend to tell the same story over and over again. If we can reframe that and see it in a positive light, where this is something that they've held on to, and this is something that they want to share with us, we can kind of change the needle in the record, if you will, for those who remember records, by thinking about, adding in something that they told you last time in order for them to continue on with that story and provide a different part of the story that maybe they hadn't told before. I met with a lady one time who told me a story about living in Mexico and what that experience was like. And she kind of got stuck in the same story over and over again, and would mention what it looked like when she lived there. So I would mention to her, the last time, I remember you mentioning this, what did it look like? What were the people like? Were there people around you? Or what were the neighbors like? So by kind of asking questions based on what she was sharing with me, we were kind of able to take that memory and add a little bit more to it, which then helped me continue to gather information that I was then able to mention next time So you're kind of able to continue on in that chapter of their life and spread out into different branches of that storytelling, which helps them feel successful and adds to their stimulation as well. So other examples are familiar voice recordings. So sometimes when a person either goes into retirement or long-term care, having recordings of the loved one's voices can be really helpful, and even better these days, virtual. So having the opportunities to be able to connect with somebody who they can see as well as who they can hear. So we're really tapping into the senses. So it's not just, a person's voice and knowing that you're familiar. It's helping that person be most stimulated with their sensory stimulation. So think about it that way. How can we best enhance that person's abilities? And what sticks with us, again, are the senses. So when everything else is stripped away, the way that we remember memories is through what we smell, what we hear, what we see, what we taste, how we feel. Think about when you get stung by a bee. You react based on how that experience went last time, and that fear that's risen up because you either got stung or the sound of it scared you. So keep that in mind. Photo albums we talked a little bit about. Also thinking of pictures and magazines. So whether it's people, whether it's children, I have a picture later on where it shows, I have what I call a coffee table book that you flip through and just see pictures of babies and children. This has been so successful for me as well. And also animals. So we have things like YouTube now. There's so many different opportunities, like videos that you might have or pictures. The dollar stores have great calendars that you could cut out the pictures of animals or children or whatever it might be. So it doesn't have to be expensive, and we need to get creative in thinking of what we're offering. Picture books, again, I touched on that a little bit. So whether it's animals or children, I've found that I've had a gentleman who, was a father of 5 children, and he went through this book and looked at the pictures and said, "Oh, you are going to grow into such a beautiful young man. And look at how strong you are carrying those pumpkins." But he talked to the picture as if it was a real person, and it was so encouraging. So, when we're talking about meaning and purpose, that almost makes me want to cry, just because it helped him feel as if he was giving back by being so complimentary and compassionate. Baby dolls. I know that there's a lot of mixed emotions around baby dolls with people who have dementia. I hope I'm stressing my point that it's not up to us. And I think we need to take away how we feel about the situation and understand that we are just providing opportunities for that person to decide how they respond. So I have a baby doll, and when I bring it out, it's all the way that you introduce it. And what I do is I say, "Hey, look what I brought with me." So I don't say, "Look at this baby doll," and I don't say, "Look at this baby." I say really nothing at all, and let that person tell me how they're going to respond. So I've had anything from, "Is that real?" to, "Oh, how sweet," and they want to hold it, to other people saying, "No, I don't want that. That's a doll," and that's fine. You put it away. And the other example is that you can just say, "This is, I thought I'd bring this. This is something that my kids play with," and it just brought back such good memories. So you don't even have to use it as a baby or a baby doll. It could be more of a prompt, something that provides a cue for reminiscence. So by bringing something like that out, you're going to know the person the best, but keeping in mind that it's not really about us. It's about that person. So if we can see that differently and consider it as an option, and to let that person decide. And the other one there's been a lot of success around is plush animals. So there's been individuals who dogs or loved cats, and by having a stuffed version or one of those automated motor ones. What am I trying to say? Those automatic ones that I can't think of the word, but the ones that just go on automatically, motion sensor, that's it. That they start meowing. So I have a fur real cat, for example, and it just starts to meow when you walk by or when you pet it, or it purrs. So those have been really successful as well. And for people who like dogs, they have similar ones for dogs as well. Yeah, and I've seen even just normal plush ones that if it looks like the animal that they had in their younger years, they sometimes become quite connected to it, and it provides another way of being emotionally connected and socially connected. So just some ideas to keep in mind. The 10 absolutes of caregiving are a wonderful reference. And so I've put on the bottom where I found these. And I think you can find them actually on a lot of different websites. They're referred to quite often if you're familiar with dementia care at all. So Joe Huey is the one who came up with these. And you can find more detail on them online. A couple that stick out for me, I won't go over them just for the sake of time, but a couple that stick out to me that I really want to stress are number 5 that says never remember, instead reminisce, or never say remember, instead reminisce. I think automatically we tend to ask people, do you remember? Do you remember who I am? Do you remember when we went to the store? Don't you remember when we went to the doctors? You know, don't you remember when we did this? So it happens, and I don't want anybody to beat themselves up over this. We're all guilty of it. But if we can change that to saying, hey, I remember when we went to the doctors, or I remember when you and I talked about this, you know, I wonder if, you know, maybe we could figure that out a little bit more. Whatever the case may be, if you can switch the language from do you or don't you remember to, hey, I remember, and helping the person by cueing them, I think that would be so helpful. And I know that's one of the strategies I use, only because if you think about it, when we're talking to people with dementia, what is dementia all about? It's about memory, and it's about the fact that people can't remember often. So when we ask a person if they remember or if they don't remember, we're kind of setting them up for failure in a lot of ways. That leads to feelings of, shoot, this is something that I should know and I don't. So we want to be as supportive and helpful as possible. And just knowing that sometimes just changing our words can be so helpful. So again, not something to beat yourself up over because you've said remember in the past. We all say it, but just remembering that this is a great tool if we can switch our wording and put it on us. We're the ones who need to be responsible for how that interaction goes when we're still dealing, most of us are still dealing with good, healthy brains, and a person with dementia, there's gaps. So we need to be able to help and fill in those gaps. So again, I'll leave the rest for you to look over and review, and they're definitely worth reading later on and referring to in the future and sharing. So implicit memory, these are some great pieces to keep in mind. I've broke it down. So when I did my research on, you know, how do I describe what implicit memory is? It's really memories that we form without trying. So the first area of implicit memory is procedural memory, which means really our automatic memory. So I gave some examples: walking, talking, playing the piano, if that's something that's, you know, strong for you, driving a car, knowing the words to a song, riding a bike, climbing stairs, typing, writing, painting. So the things that are familiar to us that we do without trying. I might refer back to these in a second once I describe all of them. Priming, being able to respond with accuracy because of, sorry, my thing is covering, because of past experiences and cues. So for example, your daily routines, being able to read a word out loud quicker after reading it to yourself first. So if there was a word, say, that you didn't necessarily recognize, and I was to read this, you know, procedural, okay, procedural memory. And so once I say it to myself, I'm then able to say it out loud much easier and more fluently. That's priming. Same with, there was an example of if you were to type, let's say you were to type automatic memory, then I asked you the letters on the top row of the keyboard, you might be able to think to yourself and say what those letters are, because you've just typed the word in your head and you're able to remember what those letters are. So that's an example of priming. Classical conditioning, without trying, we associate one thing with another. So those learned behaviors, if you think about Pavlov's dogs and how that bell ringing got the dogs to salivate and run to their bowls, even when there was no food, that's an example of classical conditioning. So these are important because if we draw on these pieces of implicit memory, it's going to help the person with dementia be so much more successful. Some examples, I'm trying to think of what I could share with you right now. The words to a song, that's a pretty easy one. I'm sure all of you are familiar with all of the research done on the benefits of music when it comes to music and memory and working with people with dementia. I know that there's a video, I think, going on again that, you know, has started even years later after it first came out on the effect of listening to a song and listening to familiar songs that he enjoyed on a playlist, and then all of a sudden coming alive and singing the words and being able to communicate. So drawing on these abilities. The fact that people drive later on when they have dementia before their license is taken away is because it's so ingrained and it's so automatic. I mean, think about ourselves. We're able to drive from A to B, and I think half the time we don't remember doing that at all. So these things come naturally, so we can draw on those. So playing music in the background or drawing on a person's sense of humor can be helpful. If writing's familiar, if reading's familiar, I've had many people who reading is something that they did even if they didn't necessarily understand what they were reading. So would look around and say, room A, 233. Fridge, because they see the labels that were around them. So we can tap into these opportunities by putting some positive messages around or having lyrics of songs listed out in large font for them to read. Because if they're not able to understand necessarily what they're reading, is there a way that we can kind of help them by starting and giving prompts in some way that we can then kind of continue on to be most successful with? That's probably enough. I don't want to go over in my time. So consider what is familiar to the person, and that's really first and foremost. So going back to the senses, of course, like I mentioned earlier, how can we draw on their preserved strengths and implicit memory like we just talked about? So I have some pictures as examples. So roles and routines, think about what's familiar. I know sometimes we have a hard time thinking about, especially for men, what men can do to be engaged. Oh, I've had individuals who love cards, both men and women, of course. So there's a container you can see on the left of poker chips, and then another one that has cards. So sometimes just if they were a poker player or enjoyed playing euchre, maybe you can't necessarily play the game anymore, but you could still organize a deck of cards. You could still try to engage in some way, maybe sort them out, which I know I'll refer to again. But having items that are familiar to the person can be so effective because it's helping. We're drawing on that long-term memory by providing things that are familiar in their senses. Folding laundry is another one. Maybe there's clothes. On the picture on the right, there's a picture of some children's clothes. But again, it's not necessarily just about the folding. It's about the memories that can come up or the conversations. Knitting. It might not be knitting so much. If the person's used to knitting for their children or for their church, thinking maybe it's more about the color and the textures of the wool or the yarn or whatever it might be. And maybe it's more winding the wool or getting it ready to donate to somebody else. That's helpful in itself. Also, topics, phrases, stories, rhymes, music, the list goes on. But providing a bit of a cue to start can help the people finish that phrase. So same with music. If I were to say, you are my, by giving that the words and the tone, you know where I'm going and you probably know the rest of the song. Famous couples. So the book on the left, Call Out the Answers, just one example of, you know, famous couples, finish the phrase, famous cliches. So different things that help that person know what to say next. So we're not setting them up for failure. I don't know about you, but for me, when it comes to crosswords, I a lot of the time don't know the answers. So That's harder. That's much more challenging for a person who has dementia. So think about the ways, the little prompts that are going to make you most successful and make that person with dementia most successful and feel like they're doing the right thing. Caring, nurturing, and helping roles. So again, however we can help that person feel like they're giving back. If they were caring, nurturing, and helping in any way in their past, we should help them be that now. So maybe things have changed. It could be just saying thank you after they've helped you to wash the dishes, or, thanks for keeping me company while, I've had so many things to do. You were right here with me, and I appreciate that. So try to find the things that we can thank the person for rather than focusing on what went wrong. Multi-purpose activities. So what I mean by this is activities that could be done in a lot of different ways. So that picture I showed you earlier with the plastic containers, I suggest having, when you have some downtime, which I know is probably few and far between, but when you're able to, maybe create little see-through containers that you can just pull out with activities for the person to engage in. Put it on the table, spread it out so it's out in the open, so that they have something to engage in or ask questions about, or a puzzle to stick a piece in now and then. So the couple of pictures, I have the wool there. So maybe it's winding, like I mentioned, instead of instead of actually knitting a pattern. Going through pictures, maybe it's organizing them or sorting them by children, by pets, or so on. Or maybe it's making a scrapbook. So there's lots of different ways that you can use the same activity. And in the top left, I made these cards that can be used to do an actual game where you flip the number over when you roll that number on the die, or you could use them just to sort the 4s out, the 5s, and so on, if numbers were something that the person was strong with. So again, I know I'm running out of time. So this talks about the different things that we can sort and match. I really just encourage you to be creative and think about the things in your home or in your organization that you have already that the person can help you with. We used to have people help with shredding papers and stamping envelopes and, inserting folded information into envelopes to send away in the mail. So think about the different ways that the person can be helpful. I had somebody organize all the National Geographics before by date because of their background in research and loving to read. So really think creatively, and I don't, of course, have all the answers here today. And then visually pleasing and plotless, thinking about not necessarily following a plot. So when a person's reading or paying attention to a show, focus on the positive and not so much on something that they have to remember. So whether it's, watching bloopers, or I listed some things at the bottom, or comedies, things that are familiar and uplifting are much more successful. Activity aprons are another opportunity for sensory stimulation for the later stages, which I'm happy to share more about if you're interested later on. So in summary, remember to draw on what's familiar, so previous roles, routines, and interests. Tap into their values, long-term memories, social history, and remaining strengths. Use a holistic view, so really think of the whole person. The need to feel productive and purposeful is essential. Be open-minded and flexible, so remove your expectations, as hard as this is. Find something kind to say to the person. Thank them for their help in whatever way that might have been. Ask for their thoughts and opinions. Keep items of interest out in the open. But when things are away, we don't think about doing them, so we need to keep them out and switch them up every now and then to make them fresh. Ask for thoughts and opinions. That's a way to help in itself. Keep items of, I said that already. Keep activities failure-free. This is essential. So let's take our judgments out of it and help them to be as failure-free as possible. So we don't need to pay attention to the rules. And then be kind and compassionate to yourself. We're not going to get it right all the time, and that is absolutely okay. That's how we learn. And that's it. So thank you very much for listening. A little quote: we are gifted, each gifted in a unique and important way. It is our privilege and our adventure to discover our own special light. Mary Dunbar said that, and I thought it was worth sharing here. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.